All right, I wanted to give kind of my favorite drill for creating better flexion in the shoulder, right? So if you're working towards wheel pose, you're working towards handstand, or you just want overall better health for the shoulder, right? This is kind of one of my go-to moves for getting more extension. Now, in a yoga class, a lot of times what gets offered to kind of open the shoulders and the chest up is puppy pose or anahata asana or heart melting pose, whatever you want to call it. But it looks something like this, okay? And it's not a bad pose, but it looks like this. You stack hips over knees, you walk your hands forward like child's pose, and you come down into it. But most of the time, for most of us, okay, it is completely passive. We just kind of lay into it. And while that may be a pretty decent thing to do, long-term health, we need there to be some strength in that end range. And then from building towards wheel, we don't need more passive range of motion necessarily. We need to make sure that we can use what we have and we have strength in it, because wheel is a very loaded pose. Handstand is a very loaded pose. Forearm balance and dolphin, they're very loaded poses, okay? So anahata, puppy pose, whatever you want to call it, it's a good pose, okay? But this thing I'm going to show you is kind of an active puppy pose. Now, put it out there, you can't do this in a yoga class, okay? Because you don't have these big exercise balls, okay? For everybody. But it's for your home practice, it's for your work at home. And if you've been with me for any amount of time, you know that I really stress a home practice, because if you really want there to be change and growth, there needs to be a home practice. It can't just be guided stuff that you do at the studio every single time, okay? Now, the way this is gonna work is you take an exercise ball just like this, and you would set up exactly the same. So I'm gonna take my arms about shoulder width distance, and I'm gonna turn my thumbs up because that feels nicest on my shoulder. Palms can be always down, palms can be up, whatever's best. But I'm gonna take it about where I'm coming into a tabletop position. And then from here, I'm not gonna kind of let my tailbone pop up like cow pose. I'm gonna try to keep the front ribs in. And all I'm gonna do is roll it forward and bring my chest and my head down, and then bring it back, okay? And then I'm gonna roll the ball forward, come into it, and come back. And I'm gonna do it one more time to show you. Again, I roll out, I'm active the whole time because my shoulders are stabilizing me into this position. And then I'm gonna pull myself out of it by rolling the ball backwards. So you're taking your shoulder into extension. This is called flexion, okay? You're taking your shoulder into flexion, right? It's probably pretty good good idea if a guy who's teaching a video about creating more flexion in the shoulder actually knows flexion versus extension. I do. It's just like you think. This should be extended because you're extending your arms overhead. It's not. It's flexion, okay? The anatomy people just wanted to put a cruel joke on us, but this is flexion, okay? So if we're using the exercise ball, it forces us to use control in and out. So we're building strength as we enter, strength as we hold it, and then we build strength as we exit. We're taking all of the ranges of motion in the full flexion as we go through, and we're building strength throughout it. So it's a more active style. It's like those ab wheels that you used to, you used to, probably some people still do. You roll them out and then you roll back. It's the same idea, but for your shoulder. Again, puppy pose, it's fine. It feels good, right? It feels good to melt your heart, okay? But if you want to get serious about your shoulders, there needs to be some strength in there. We can't just passively stretch it, okay? So do puppy pose with a yoga ball. Do puppy pose with a more of an eccentrically loaded motion in and out. My favorite way to do it, if I'm prepping for handstand, I do this. If I'm prepping for wheel, I do this. Again, can't do it in a yoga class because we don't have these, but you do on your home practice, and it's essential. If you're serious about your yoga practice, you have to have a home practice. It takes more discipline than going to the studio, but that discipline is where we truly grow.